quiz you just took with your agency Strikeforce team, we have been administering this to media planners and buyers all across Dallas. So we did 48 people at the Richards Group yesterday. We did a bunch at OMD. The third one was Southwest, and then we had Morocco, and then
Camelot.
So what you just did, we put them through. And the idea came from actually my wife. We're all good ideas always come from. When she was a medical resident, she's an OBGYN, in her residency, they had a catchphrase. See one, do one, teach one. So you would watch the medical procedure being done, then you would do it yourself, then you had to teach it to someone else. And the way you really learn, as I learned from her, is actually by doing. Like, so when you were like taking the test today, that what is that answer? And that's what we were trying to do with the agency folks. Instead of somebody talking to them for 50 minutes, it was kind of them trying to learn these things. All of these things don't all have to do with radio. Some of these are just basic, like what drives sales, regardless of media use. So this was a concept that your agency team, Dan and Alec, kind of came up with, and we've been perfecting this, and it seems to have gone, I think, okay. So this might be something we might be doing in some of the other markets. Maybe make it an interactive web thing where people could take it online and get graded or something like that. So why don't we dive in and let's look at some of the answers. So what's the job of advertising? You are the best people to ask this question for. So any quick elevator sound bites on what's the job of advertising?
Brand awareness.
Brand awareness. What else?
Drive revenue.
Drive revenue. What else?
Create a demand.
Create a demand. All good answers. This is one where there's no bad answer. My two favorites come from Tom Goodwin. If you ever spend any time on LinkedIn, and I think I've tried to LinkedIn with almost all of you that I could find on LinkedIn. Tom Goodwin, you'll find him a lot on social media. He's the EVP of Innovation and Strategy at Zenith. And he says the job of advertising is like threefold. First, make sure the product is top of mind and awareness is high. So somebody said awareness. Two, that the brand is liked and understood. Like people know what you stand for. Like what makes you special. And then finally, that the products are good enough to be sure people want to use them time and time again. That's really the job of the business. Now, the second quote here comes from one of my most favorite people of all time that I had the opportunity to work with, and that's Erwin Efron. He's the father of modern media planning. And he said simply, the job of advertising is to remind people of the brands they know when they happen to need the product. So his point is advertising does not create demand. Advertising does not make you buy something. It's there as the reminder when you have that need. And this is where reach comes in. And anytime anybody asks me, and they asked me just this week, what about flighting, on and off? Erwin would say, take whatever budget you have and be on consistently. Be on consistently, because if somebody has a need and you happen to catch them that week, it's better to have been on. So that's kind of the overall job of advertising. All right, let's talk about brand building and sales activation. This is probably my most favorite chart in the whole wide world, because this really shows you what brand building can do for a company in terms of driving sales and what a sale or an offer or a sales activation can do. This is from a book. It's a small book, short book, 80-page book, called The Long and the Short of It by Peter Field and Les Binet. And we have a copy of the book for free. If you want the PDF, we can send you the link. It is a very dense book, meaning there's not a lot of fluff to it. I spent last summer kind of going through it chapter by chapter slowly. I learned more about advertising and marketing from that book than I think anything I've ever read. And what we're looking at here is sales lift over the base. So the gray line is sales activation, the blue line is brand building. So look at the sales activation. It's like a sugar rush. You do the campaign, shoosh, sales goes up, boom, falls down, goes up, down, up, down. And notice that it doesn't build. It just, you're like standing in place. And look at brand building. Brand building builds on itself. As the brand is building its image and what it stands for, over time, there's a strong sales lift. Now, what Benet and Fields did for this analysis and for their book, they had the opportunity to analyze the largest database of advertising case histories in the world. It's an industry organization in the UK called the IPA, the Institute of the Practitioners of Advertising, an agency organization. And they have hundreds of case studies. Every case study has the budget, what media they bought, what the goals of the campaign were, and then the long-term and short-term sales impact. So this kind of database gave them an amazing ability to create charts like this. Now, here is the conundrum. Look at the short term. What gets more sales in the short term, like, a quarter out to 6 months? The sale. Okay, and then medium and long term, what drives sales more? The brand building. And so here's the conundrum. Because you have clients that are worried about this quarter. I need to make the quarter. I need to drive revenue today. And so that'll steer you off into an offer, a sale, some kind of an event. But the problem is if you get caught up in that loop of what's called short-termism, and they don't brand their business and establish a reputation and an image, they never grow. It's this kind of an up and down thing. So there is a tension, a natural tension, between brand building and kind of sales activation. Benet Fields say the ideal mix is 60-40, that 60% of the money should be against brand building and 40% should be against sales activation. So this, I thought, was a very, very cool chart in the book. Now let's talk about share of voice and share of market. Clients ask you, what are the things that I can do to grow? I'm advertising, but my sales are flat. What's going on? So Benet and Fields have a very cool chart that shows the relationship between share of voice and share of market. Share of voice is, what is my ad budget divided over the ad budget in my category? So imagine in Dallas there's $100 million of furniture store advertising. So that's what all of the furniture stores in Dallas spend, and that my store spends $6 million. So my share of voice is 6%. So for every $100 of furniture advertising, I represent $6. So that's my share of voice. And then the easy one is share of market. What's my revenue divided by the total revenue in the market? So those two things work in relationship. So what this says is that if you overspend your share, meaning your share of voice is higher, it's up here, than your share of market, what Benet Fields and all the data says is you're going to grow. If your share of spend and share of market is about the same, then you're just going to be at equilibrium. You're not growing, you're not eroding, you're kind of flat. But if we're, quote, trying to save money, and your share of spend is lower than your market share of revenue, that's a predictor that that brand sales will go down. And so this is kind of a way of helping a business kind of understand, why is it that I advertise and my sales are flat? Because there is absolutely an equilibrium point where you're kind of treading water. But the good news is, if you weren't advertising at all, things start to go south over time. So this is, I think, a nice way for a retailer and advertiser to kind of think about if they really want to grow, you've got to step up to the plate. Geico, at one point, was the number 32 insurance company in America. They're now number 2. They made sure their share of voice exceeded their market share. And they kept doing it year after year and absolutely, grew the business. Okay, here are 6 factors that drive sales. Nielsen did a huge study 500 different brands, all sorts of different categories, and they collapse the findings. And the idea here is all of these things drive sales. So reach is like how many different people did the campaign reach. Brand, those are the attributes of the company. You don't really control that, but those are the kind of the images and the perceptions of the brand. Targeting, a lot of people get very excited about using data to kind of find the right audience online. Context, you know, it's a pet food advertiser in a pet food show or a show about pets. You know, sometimes we can have a good match on that, and most advertising can't do that. Recency is the ability to hit people when they're in the market. So I'm thinking of buying a car, an ad comes on. Great time, because I'm actually thinking about it. And then creative is the quality of the creative. So those are the 6 attributes they have to add to 100%. I'm just going to pick one of them, creative. What percent, and all these have to add to 100, what percent of sales lift do you think is represented by creative? Any guesses?
10%.
10? What else?
25.
25?
50.
50? Wow.
15.
15. What else? Come on, this row here. What'd you have?
40.
40?
I have 15.
15? 15? Okay. We were at, what agency was it yesterday?
Southwest Media.
Yeah, it's a media agency. Okay, so you, wherever you work, you think we drive everything. The consensus there was about 15%. The Nielsen study says creative is 47% of sales. And some would argue that that's a low number. There are media mix modelers out there like Analytic Partners and Ipsos that will tell you that creative is 70% of sales lift. So creative matters. At Westwood One, where we're dealing with somewhat bigger advertisers, we are now testing creative for clients because it represents half of the sales lift. And that's why, you know, we put out a couple of weeks ago or a month ago some creative best practices. You know, simple stuff like make sure the client's name is mentioned a lot in the ad. I mean, my example is, look, watch what Geico does. What's the first thing you hear in a Geico ad? They'll come on and say, Geico presents. I mean, they literally, the first word of the ad is their name. So branding, making sure the name of the retailer is in there. And look at reach. That's huge. Look at the relationship between reach and targeting. Targeting is 9% of sales lift. Reach is 22%. Reach trumps targeting 2.5 to 1. People get crazy, oh, I have data, I can predict, I should target these people. Probably the best case study on how too much targeting can cause sales to go down was Procter & Gamble and Febreze. There was a big article in the Wall Street Journal like a year or two ago. And it said that, you know, they had data that said the bigger the family, the more they use Febreze. It's an air freshener thing. If the family had pets, you know, there was more of a need for Febreze. And so they were targeting big families' pets on Facebook with this narrow target. Sales kept going down and down and down. They got rid of all the targeting, went 18 plus, sales went up. So you can target yourself right off a cliff. And what, to be honest, all of the big studies say the one media factor that will drive sales is reach. And so what I'm now doing when I'm talking to a client or I talk to a salesperson and they say, I got a sales plan, what's the reach? That's my first question. What percent of Dallas are we going to reach in a week off the tap scan run? What's the reach? And is there anything we can do to get that reach up? So reach and creative, pretty crucial. So, how do we go get reach? Well, Benet Field says there's 3 pockets of people to target to drive your business. Long-term prospects, immediate prospects, and then the existing customer base. the biggest opportunity for growth is from long-term prospects. It's the biggest group. These people barely know anything about your business. This is a long-term project. You're not going to get them this quarter. This is a long-term seduction, but the opportunity, medium and long-term, there are a lot of people there to go get. The next group are the immediate prospects. They actually know something about the business. There might be some name recognition there. Never been in the store, never tried it, but there's a little bit of knowledge there. Now, there's not as many of them, so it's not a pot of gold, but because there's some familiarity and awareness, you can get them quicker. And then lastly is the customer base. And for 20 years, marketers have been obsessed with CRM, customer relationship management. I'll email my database, I'll work my database. And what all the gurus like Benet Fields and Byron Sharp are saying is that not a source of growth. They're already customers. They're already going to buy. You hammer them with some emails, you're probably just pulling forward future sales that would have already happened. So the growth is kind of up here with immediate and long-term prospects. Let's talk about creative, since it's so important. And let's talk about the two kinds of creative, rational and emotional. So give me some examples. Define rational creative, emotional creative.
I'd say rational is like feature benefit.
Facts and figures.
Yep.
APR, X% down. Yeah.
The other would be, creating some fear, safety, making someone, I feel like they need to have it so they're safe and secure.
Absolutely. Make me feel something, tell a story. And quite frankly, a lot of our best ads are our personality endorsements. They're storytelling. There's always a story. They're master storytellers. This is what they do for a living. And their stories resonate. So what Benet Fields did is they looked through all of the case studies and they looked at the creative and cataloged it as either rational or emotional. And across however you want to measure brand effect, whether you want to measure it by awareness, commitment, trust, differentiation, quality, fame, image, they found that emotion-based storytelling creative performs better across all these attributes compared to just rational facts and figures ads. Now, remember the sales event spike up and down and up and down? Remember how the sales activation actually worked better in the short term? Rational ads work when you're in the market. So, Christine Travellini, who's she's the president of Katz now, she has a niece that has Crohn's disease. So when that Crohn's ad came on TV with that long disclaimer and all of that information, she said, I was like riveted. Because it's something meaningful to her. If I'm in the market for a car, it's okay that there's this long disclaimer and all this jargon and stuff, because I'm actually leaning in. We just worked on a study for Katz. Because one of the issues they've been hearing about from the auto manufacturers is, we don't think those tier 2 radio ads work because they're unlistenable, because the disclaimers are too long. Because in TV, if you're a tier 2 advertiser, you can put all the fine print in the lower third of the screen. Well, in the radio ad, you actually have to say it. And so that could take 15 to 25 seconds out of a 60. And some of the dealers are saying it's unlistenable. So we actually tested 20 ads, tier 2 ads from all around the country. Guess what we found? And we recruited auto intenders. So the people that were evaluating these ads were folks that were in the market for a new vehicle in the next year. These ads were some of the best testing ads our testing vendor had ever tested. They tested about 2,300 ads. These ads were in the top 20%. Because when you're in the market, the details are okay. All that facts and figures and stuff is actually interesting and useful. So those are the brand effects. What about sales effect? So what they found is long-term, whether it's growing share, reducing pricing sensitivity, which means people are willing to pay more, or sales, the emotional creative went really well. And I know sometimes this is a struggle because you're dealing with a retailer and they want to cram the ad with all these facts. And what we would say to them is, tell me why you're unique. Tell me a story about the brand. You can rotate copy, so you can say, like, 60% of your copy will be brand building, 40% will be sales activation. But we need to tell the story of your brand and make it resonate. Okay, let's talk about targeting. Heavy QSR consumers, luxury car buyers, high-end travelers, people in the market for furniture. What's the ideal demo for these guys? Before I jump into that, I wanted to do something interesting for you. You might like this slide. This is the profile of Dallas heavy media users. Heavy radio listeners in Dallas, heavy digital users, and heavy TV viewers. This is the top 20% of the people. Now, what's so important about heavy media users? It's not the 80-20 rule, but it's like the 20-50 rule. They're generally the 20% of the people that do 50% of the time spent. So the heavy TV people, if you run a TV campaign, half of your impressions will look like this. So what's interesting about the heavy internet users and the heavy radio users is, look at how similar they are. Age, income, employment, children, they're almost interchangeable. And that's why radio and digital make such a great combination, because it's the heavy user is very similar. But look at the heavy TV user, much older. Kids are gone, empty nesters, they're retired. Basically, it's your grandparents. That's what you get in Dallas when you buy TV. 50% of your impressions are going to be median age of 60, retired, not employed, kids are gone, not big on social media, and 60% of them over the age of 55. Nothing wrong with TV. If you have an older demo, God bless you. But if you're trying to reach people like under the age of 55, you can see, and this, by the way, this chart is the same in every market. Radio and digital are actually the better combination. So that's just profiling our heavy users. Now let's get to those targets. So in Dallas, the heavy QSR consumer, 1834, done, great. Well, the heavy QSR consumer, a third of them are 1834, but in Dallas, almost as many over the age of 55. So you realize that you can't, there's no perfect demo. Look at luxury car buyers. 25, 54, 75,000 plus income, right? Almost 40% of them are over the age of 55. And this is a very simple, I just did this with Scarborough, it's a very simple chart. I kind of like it because it kind of tells you who is the target. Tell me a little bit about the target, and tell me a little bit about their age profile. There is a move afoot in media to move away from demographic targeting to what's called purchaser targeting. Just find me the buyers. So what that would mean is I run Scarborough, I find the heavy QSR consumer, and I stop there and I just say, what radio stations, TV stations, cable network can I find those people on? And then worry about a demo, as opposed to doing the demo first. TV networks are doing this with cable set-top data, matching it to purchase. This is, I think, a smarter way. Okay, let's talk about media use. So here is all of the cool platforms. Nielsen publishes on a quarterly basis something called the Total Audience Report. They take all these platforms and they look for two things. What percent of Americans are reached by these platforms, and then how much time do they spend? So, according to Nielsen, the digital stuff, like streaming and video streaming, is in the 40s. TV-connected devices like Roku and Apple TV, and then it stair steps up from there. The news of the death of television and radio are kind of exaggerated. But what's interesting is actually radio outreaches TV. But what about 1834s? What about millennials? Well, let's lay that in. Not surprisingly, with millennials, you see a little bit more of the streaming stuff pop up. You do see the stair step down for TV. So almost 1 out of 4 millennials in America are not reached by kind of regular linear TV, but look at radio. Radio's reach among 1834s, and no matter what time you pick, is significant. And this is always shocking to agencies, because there is this perception that, okay, radio's old, therefore no one under the age of 35 listens to radio. All right, let's talk about TV. Let's talk about, I'm in the living room, the ads are coming on. Nielsen did a study where, somewhat creepily, they put infrared cameras behind the TV to be able to look at people's eyes. So when the ads come on, where are people's eyes? Are they eyes on glass or somewhere else? The data says that 40% of the time, people's eyes are actually on the glass, sight, sound, and motion. But an equal percentage are actually on their phone. And 20% are out of the room. So what we're saying to the agencies is, your audio track on your TV ad better be doing a lot of work. Better be clearly branding, clearly explaining the offer, and having all the information. Because there is many people that are just hearing the TV ad as seeing the TV. In essence, make your TV ad like a radio ad, and make that audio track really useful. Because those phones sure are distracting. Now people will say, well, yeah, but everybody can punch around on radio. Nielsen did a major study with media monitors. They looked at millions and millions of minutes of tuning, and they looked at stop sets. And what they found something very interesting is that 2/3 of all radio listening occasions in America do not involve switching between stations. These occasions of listening occur with radio on and radio off. And if you look at your loyal listeners, your P1s, or the most preferred consumers, those listeners to each of your stations, 90% of the listening occasions occur with radio on, radio off. Very little switching. So there's not nearly as much kind of punching around as you would suspect. All right, let's talk about audio platforms. Each quarter, as you know, Edison publishes Share of Ear. It's like the gold standard of audio use. Edison has consumers fill out a 24-hour diary online, and they're looking for two things. What percent of the country are reached by these various platforms, and how much time are they spending? And Edison has a very broad definition of audio. It includes the music you personally own, your CDs, the time you spend listening to the iTunes songs that are on your phone that you've actually purchased, satellite radio, those cable music channels way up high on your cable system, podcasting, YouTube. I mean, this is a very broad definition. All right, so I didn't do this for the agency, but what's AM/FM share of audio time spent?
55.
55. This is share. We're not talking reach. So 55. What else? 50. Any others along the last year? What percent of all audio time spent goes to AM/FM? 40. Anybody else? 65. 65. All right. Survey said you guys were pretty right on the mark. This is share of audio time spent. So if you add up all the minutes Americans spend with AM/FM radio, about half go to AM/FM. And then it falls off really fast. Number 2 is owned music at 12%. can't buy ads in that. Number 3, music videos on YouTube. This shocks everybody. What's the #1 audio streaming service in America? YouTube. People use it like a radio station. They string together some videos, they minimize it. Now, an advertiser cannot buy an audio ad in YouTube. It's a video service. Advertising free SiriusXM has a 5 share. TV music channels have a 5 share. None of those you can buy ads on. TV music channels are bigger than Pandora.
Wow.
Pandora only has a 4 share. A 4 share. Podcasts are 3 and growing. Ad-free Spotify a 2 share, and it falls off pretty quickly from there. I can't tell you how important this chart is. There's not a meeting that I'm in that I don't bring this chart up. And the reason is because if you were to ask advertisers a very simple question, you have 100 share points, you have Pandora and Spotify here, you got AM, FM here, what do you think the share is? Pandora, Spotify, AM, FM, the answer is 50-50. That is the perception. Now, why is that a perception? Number 1, Pandora is a brand, it's a consumer brand. So I've heard of it, people have heard of it, so it must be big. Same thing for Spotify. But the disconnect between this, which is reality, and perception is gigantic. Gigantic. And so this is part of every deck I do. And we can't stop doing this enough. If you're sick of it, keep doing it. And what about in the car? What's AM/FM's share of audio in the car? 74.
89.
89. What else? 90. Wow, okay. 70. You guys are pretty good. It's 67%. But there's a lot of stuff on here that you can't buy ads in. They're playing the ad-free SiriusXM music channels. You can't buy ads in that. Own music, 8%. Ad-supported SiriusXM, 4%, and it drops pretty quickly. Somebody mentioned the 89, which was a good memory. If you take all the stuff here that you can buy ads in, and just look at that and get rid of all the commercial-free stuff, the AM/FM share in the car of stuff you can buy ads in, 89%. Now people say, well, I heard the connected car is going to revolutionize radio and the car will be a rolling Wi-Fi and magical futuristic stuff. Maybe, but this is Q1. Right now, if you needed to reach people when they're making shopping decisions, they're at the mall, they're picking their kids up, 90 share, 86 share of in-car. Okay. Speaking of the car, how do people get to work in America? According to the census, 86% of Americans use a car or a truck. Only 5% use public transportation. 9% are walking or work from home or whatever. The only city in America where this chart looks different is New York. New York City, about 60 to 70% of New Yorkers are using public transportation. Unfortunately, New York is also the capital of media planning and buying. So if you're 26 and you live in New York, you take the subway. And you think, well, everyone takes the subway in America. And there's an expression that we always have to remind ourselves. You need to take the me out of media. You can't take your personal life experiences and think that everyone else does what I do. Because this is how America gets to work, car or truck. It's hard to do that when you're sitting in New York and everybody's on the subway. All right, let's talk about AM/FM radio in the plan and how can you drive reach. So from now on, every time you put a plan together, run the reach and frequency. What's the reach? What percent of Dallas are they reaching? How can you drive reach up? Well, one approach is instead of selling a couple of the stations, sell them all the stations. Same money, So here's an example. If I just bought the top 5 stations in the average market, I'd reach 1 out of 3 people. If I took the same money, the same GRPs, and I spread it out over 15 stations, my reach goes up 22%. So remember how important reach was to sales effect and how important reach was to sales lift? Same money, 22% increase. Another strategy, open up the day parts. You know, people think, oh, I'm only going to buy radio and drive times. We had a client on the network, Quaker Overnight Oats, a new breakfast product. They put all their money in morning drive because they thought, oh, that's when people eat breakfast. They forgot the fact that you got to buy it at the grocery store. There are people that plan ahead, and you have to build up the awareness. We showed them that if they took the same media weight and spread it out over more day parts, they could have increased the reach 50% for the same money. So you can drive reach up, more stations, more day parts, and a more diverse programming mix. All right, what's the average ROI for radio?
10 to 1.
Oh my God, how'd you know? Now remember, averages can be misleading. Consumer packaged goods, fast food, QSR, those are very inexpensive things to buy. So your ROIs in those categories are more in the $3 to $4 to $5 range. Once you get into retail, mass merchandiser, department stores, you see, or auto aftermarket, you see ROIs in the teens and the 20s. And this simply means, for auto aftermarket, if I spend $1 of radio advertising, I will get $21 of incremental sales. Now, these studies were done on the entire radio campaign. It wasn't one station in 1 week. That's important to remember. Because nobody's going to come on this week, spend $5,000 with you, and say, oh, I should be able to get like 10 to 1 right there. These are based upon all radio, and they were like campaigns, so they were like a quarter's worth with big reach. Okay. Let's talk about search. Sequent Partners did a study that found that radio, on average, can drive search 29% increase across a whole series of different categories. One of the things that we're going to be experimenting with is looking at tools that can help you and your clients actually measure what the radio ads did to drive lift in search for their business and what the radio ads did to drive website activity. So there's a company called C3 Metrics we're going to start to pilot some things with. So definitely radio can move the needle for their website and for search. So if you have, the typical media budget is TV digital, no radio. If you took 20% of that budget, didn't increase the budget and just reallocated to radio, what happens to the reach? 22% reach for the same money. So in this particular case, an all TV digital campaign reached half the market. You put radio in there, no increase in budget, big lift in reach, plus an enhancement to awareness of brand consideration, intention to purchase, and brand advocacy. So that really makes a difference. One of the news stories you're going to see over the next year is coming out of the most respected advertiser in America, Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is one of the most watched advertisers because they're one of the most analytical. They study everything. They do creative testing. They do ROI studies, media mix modeling. Procter & Gamble has been off radio for 40 years, 40. Over the last year and a half, they are coming back in radio like there's nobody's business. Their fiscal begins July 1st, and the RFPs are raining down. Why? 2 reasons. Digital fraud. When you're a wholesome company and your ads start sponsoring ISIS videos in the programmatic marketplace, that can scare you to death. Number 2, TV is not giving P&G the reach that they once got. And they've been very public about this. So when P&G is coming back into radio in a big way, I think that's a harbinger for a lot of other advertisers. Because there are a lot of other people that go, "Ah, those guys are smart." So if they're coming back to radio because they need to drive reach and grow their business, but we should look at it too. So they're a great poster child. So a couple of cool things that are coming down the pipe that I wanted to share. Smart speakers. The growth of smart speakers in the last 3 years has actually been faster than the growth of smartphones in the first 3 years. So smartphones were launched in 2007 by the iPhone. 3 years later, 15% of Americans had a smartphone. We're already into 3 years of smart speakers, and 20% of Americans have them. And it's been great for radio. Because clock radios have kind of been disappearing from homes, and smart speakers bring, in essence, radio sets back into the house. And I showed them yesterday, this is the KPLX Alexa curve, hour by hour. Big spike in the morning. If you overlay KPLX's Nielsen at home, hour by hour, laid over, different scales, but it looks the same. So Alexa truly is bringing radios back into the home. Same thing with Google Home. You guys have created the Skill, which is the nickname for the little piece of voice-controlled software that gets Alexa and Google Home to play the station. So I think that's going to be something, a cool thing for our industry. Oops, I'm going backwards. Now let's talk about HD radio. So this May, a federal law went into effect that said every new car manufactured has to have a backup camera so that you can see who's behind you. Well, that backup camera requires a video screen to be in the car. And the video screen is good for us because it can allow us to put images, static images, onto the screen. So have you ever noticed you're in a late model car, and you're flipping around the dial and you see the album cover and you can see, the title and artist? Well, that same technology allows you to put a static image of one of your advertisers on, and it can be synced to their over-the-air radio ad. So Nielsen did a study of this. They picked a car dealer and they picked an advertiser like Home Depot. Here's what they found. So they did a study where half the people only heard the car dealer ad in the car, and the other half got the radio ad plus the static visual. Now, it's not a video. It's not full motion video because we can't be distracting people. So it's a static image.
While we're texting.
Yeah. But look at what happened. Look at what happened to the awareness for the car dealer. So people were played a standard stop set, and then the question was asked, "Hey, do you remember the name of the car dealer?" Only 4% could, which, by the way, is a testament to the sorry state of automotive dealer ads in America. Because if you listen to the typical car dealer ad, what do you hear the most? $29.99, $39.99, blah, blah, blah. What's the name of the dealer? They're not saying their name enough. They need to say their name. People don't remember these car dealer ads because they're so focused on the deal, they're not even saying their name. So, but anyway, look what happened to ad recall for the dealer with that visual. So that is really something we should be doing more of. Home Depot ran an ad that was promoting a special from Scott's Turf Builder. Big lift in ad recall for that featured item among the people that got the static image and heard the ad on the radio. Another cool technology is Next Radio. Next Radio is the app that lets you listen to radio on an iPhone. It plays the stream of your over-the-air. Not the online stream, but it plays the over-the-air stream. And on an Android phone, it uses an FM chip in the phone to play the station over the air. Well, so great about this app? Well, the cool thing about the app is it knows if you heard the ad and it knows what stores you went into. So now we can do attribution studies to prove cause and effect of radio. So a campaign for a retailer, we discovered that of the people that heard the ad, the store visitation was 19% higher among people that heard the ad versus people that weren't exposed to the ad. So we as an industry are starting to light up some tools that can prove impact, that can prove that we're bringing people to the store. We can prove that people went to your website, that people searched for your business. So C3 Metrics is a company that we're starting to pilot and experiment with. And what we do is they go to one of your clients and they say, I need a read-only Google Analytics access. Read-only Google Analytics access. They're not tagging the site, they're not pixeling the site, they're not doing anything to get the IT people at your clients like grumpy. It's just read-only Google Analytics file. Then they go into media monitors and they pull up the radio campaign, either on their cluster or in the market, and then they can correlate what was the lift in search and what was the lift in site traffic because of radio. And so one of the things we're kind of experimenting with is maybe creating some kind of a package, like a 3-month package, which would have radio and digital. And then the advertiser would get one of these reports as part of the package. So we're going to be piloting that idea in the next couple of months. So main messages. It's a struggle, it's a tension, but balance sales activation with brand building, because brand building is how you get growth in the medium and the long term. Reach and creative kind of rule the roost when it comes to sales lift. We're now really getting into proving impact. Putting radio in the plan, P&G plan. If it's good enough for P&G, it should be good enough for any advertiser in this market. Add radio to the plan, grow your reach, and grow your sales. And there's kind of a starting of a movement away from demo targeting to purchaser targeting. And that is